legal production, processing, and sale of recreational marijuana. Well, I'm here to argue or state a position that the sale of marijuana is not a good thing, at least for my city, the city of Kennewick. I'm not here, however, to debate the merits of marijuana itself. I'll leave that to the individuals who have a much better understanding of the pros and cons of marijuana use. The reasoning for the Kennewick City Council not supporting the legal production and processing and retail sale of marijuana stems primarily from what we see as a very poorly written law approved by the voters of Washington State. Now, the bill legalizing recreational marijuana is seen by most of the cities of the state as nothing more than another unfunded mandate, and as a result, leaves very little compensation for local cities to deal with the challenges stemming from the sale of marijuana. Taxes for the production of the crops is 25%. For processing, another 25%. For the sale is 25%, plus 6.5% sales tax. Now, for the burdens that come from hosting marijuana dispensaries, the city of Kennewick would receive only a very small portion of the sales tax, which equals approximately 1%, that are imposed on the final sale of the product. So as you look at these numbers, you see 81.5% overall sales tax for marijuana, and the cities get approximately 1% of that. Now, with that 1%, the city of Kennewick is required to provide police protection for the production, processing, and retail sale of the marijuana. And because the sale of marijuana is still illegal at the federal level, which in turn means banks will not do business with marijuana dispensaries, requiring these businesses to deal primarily in cash. Now, the presence of large quantities of cash is in itself a motivation for more crime. Additionally, we found with the approval of medical marijuana that the number of break-ins for those who maintain quantities in their homes increased by approximately 14% following the authorization of medical marijuana. Now, our number one priority on the Kennewick City Council is the safety and protection of our citizens, and that includes those in the business of producing and selling, as well as those who purchase the final products. The increased costs are levied on the local communities, but the revenue goes to the state. This is unacceptable because it puts the burden of the costs on the shoulders of the taxpayers. My second reason for opposing the sale of marijuana is that as the mayor, I am obligated to uphold the will of my constituents. Now, while the vote passed by the citizens of Washington State, approximately 60% of Kennewick voters said they did not want the growth, processing, and sale of recreational marijuana in their city. Now, regardless of my own personal beliefs, I am sworn to uphold the wishes of the residents of my city. And on this issue, we on the council, and I as the mayor feel that citizens have spoken. Now, the first question you ask is, how do cities even have the right to ban marijuana when the voters approved Initiative 502? Well, Washington state law requires each city to establish zoning areas where the growth, processing, and sale of marijuana would be a permitted use. The Kennewick City Council and our Planning Commission simply chose not to authorize zones that would permit these activities. Additionally, the Washington State Attorney General released his position on this issue and clearly stated that cities do have the right to decide to ban or authorize marijuana sales. Now, based on these two facts, your Kennewick City Council chose to ban the sale of recreational marijuana. Now, in conclusion, and again I say, this is not about judging people for their use of marijuana. And I'm not here to offer any opinion on people's lifestyles. I am simply saying that the legalization of marijuana was not carried out in a responsible manner. And the state of Washington has not provided adequate provisions for the cities like the city of Kennewick. Our job, my job, is to ensure that the citizens, business owners, tourists are protected and that their tax dollars are appropriately and effectively utilized. Thank you.
All right, I'll start my timer here. Hello, it is an honor to be invited here to speak my mind in front of a group of critically minded, intelligent individuals. Any opportunity extended to the members of the cannabis community to take part in the larger social conversation is encouraging, and it's very positive towards the future I see ahead of us. My name is Steve Lee, and I will do my best to address some of these issues as a bit of an internet scholar and a guy who really loves his town and weed. In a recent opinion piece for the Herald, and just now, Mayor Young laid out the justifications for the things the City Council considered when they enacted their ban. It's just another unfunded mandate pushed down on us from Olympia. It's a voter initiative. The people already put that there. Olympia didn't put that on us. The localities only get sales tax revenue like any other taxable sale, and with that 1%, we would need to provide extra policing and folks to zone these businesses into existence. They're also worried about the unknowns, impaired drivers and the social toll of marijuana, potential addiction, a stepping stone to harder drugs, work and school absenteeism, and availability to youth. And I'm reiterating a little bit of this just to make this point later. Another major factor, Mayor Young said, is that 56% of the voters didn't want it, and as elected officials, they're sworn to uphold the wishes of the residents of the city, and on this issue, they've spoken. We discussed the mechanism that they've used to inflict the ban on our community, which is just a decision to not zone rather than to zone it into existence. And the State Attorney General's opinion that was released, in my understanding of it, and again, I could be totally misinformed, was his opinion was that there was nothing in the law that took away city zoning privileges. It wasn't that, yes, bans are great, and you're more than welcome and protected legally from being sued for enacting these bans. It was, no, you haven't lost your zoning authority. The city does have zoning authority. So 1 + 1 = 2. Not necessarily, hey, go for a ban. The Kennewick City Council oath. I do solemnly swear that I will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties of the office of Kennewick City Councilman as presented by the law to the best of my ability, and will support and maintain all ordinances of the City of Kennewick, the laws and Constitution of the State of Washington, and the United States of America, so help me God. Now, nothing in there says anything about upholding the wishes of the residents of the city. And I understand, as an elected official, that is a primary concern. But the oath is conspicuously evident in that it says a couple of times that the job is to uphold the law of the community and the state. So, with that in mind, here's some legal fun facts. A law is null and void if it is in direct conflict with a Washington state law or the Washington state constitution. That would be an unconstitutional law. Also, Washington courts have found that local law can't be in conflict with the intent of state law. Now, state law under I-502 states on page 1, part 1, section 1, subsection 3. Part 1, intent, it's very clearly listed. The people intend to stop treating adult marijuana use as a crime and try a new approach that. Subsection 3 takes marijuana out of the hands of illegal drug organizations and brings it under a tightly regulated state licensed system similar to that for controlling hard alcohol. The intent is very clear. It also is so very clear that the ban completely invalidates the intent. And as the ban is basically ensuring a monopoly for the black and gray market marijuana industry, it seems that it's pretty opposed to the intent of the law. Since the ban is not in following with the intent of the law, it should be illegal. The ban, I mean, it's in direct conflict. So as we discussed earlier, if a law breaks a pre-existing state law, it's unconstitutional and therefore null and void. Let's discuss the unforeseen law enforcement costs. That's a big one for the council, and it's legitimate. And I guess depending on how you use it, it's either a really good thing or a bad thing. That it's just too early to tell. There's not really any empirical data. It's only been a few months, and anyone that says they know the true facts, they're lying. There's not enough information to really make any hard scientific conclusions. But there has been a bit of early data coming from Colorado. in their efforts. And our system is incredibly different from theirs for a lot of reasons. They started with a thriving and well-regulated marijuana industry. They also require 70% of each store's product to be grown by that store. And their taxes are 1/3 the amount of Washington's 75% excise tax. But despite all that, for these comparisons, I would say that the people of Colorado don't seem much more criminal or nefarious than the everyday Washingtonian. So there are some things we can certainly extrapolate. According to the Uniform Crime Reporting data from Denver, they've had, since legalization, a 10.1% decrease in overall crime, including a 5.2% decrease in violent crime, including domestic violence. Their highway fatalities are at an all-time historic low since legalization. By getting rid of the criminal aspect of marijuana consumption, possession, production, processing, the state is also estimating their savings in their legal system to the tune of $12 to $40 million over the course of 1 year. Surely some of those economic savings would benefit our community, and there are other economic impacts as well to consider. Colorado's garnered $10 million in taxes in the first 4 months, and just for a comparison, we just spoke to the Washington State Liquor Control Board folks, and in July, Washington State, with its measly 30 stores, produced $750,000 in sales tax and excise tax. In August, they have raised over $1.7 million, and that's with 35 stores, and there's supposed to be 350 open in the state. There has been a boom in marijuana-related research in Colorado due to lifting restrictions, and high-tech and medical jobs are flocking there to study this previously banned plant. There are 10,000 newly legal pot jobs, with 2,000 of those in the month of August alone in Colorado, and home prices have appreciated 8.7% since legalization. Those are all facts. It's pretty well understood by most of the people that I've spoken to that the economic aspect is chief concern among the council, and that's what's keeping the system from working in our community. Not necessarily the pesky unintended cost part, depending on who you talk to, but the where's our cut part. The not in our backyard unless you pay us more rent for your cut part. Either way, if it's truly economic responsibility at play, the council should immediately revoke their unconstitutional ban. Since the State Liquor Control Board has issued licenses to retail stores in Kennewick and every other locality with a ban, the only thing preventing these legitimate business owners from opening and generating a profit is a local law that bans it. If a local law is found to be unconstitutional, the city would be held liable for damage caused by that law. Damages would be, at a minimum, the amount of profits that these licensed businesses were prevented from earning from the time that license was issued from the state until the time the ban was overturned in court. So the court would just look at a shop in a town and let it happen, say, how much money did you make? And that's how much our local governments have to pay these marijuana businesses. The longer the ban is enacted, the bigger the checks they're going to have to write. And that doesn't even begin to touch on the fact that the city could, and in my opinion should, be held liable for anything that happens due to the illegal marijuana trade. Since state law not only allows but requires the creation of a legal market to combat the black market, local governments that choose to violate state law in favor of black market must be held liable for that black market. A lot of people talk about how dry counties are constitutional under local zoning authority, and if that's okay, it's fine. If it's fine to restrict alcohol, then it's okay to restrict marijuana in the same way. But there's one key difference. I'm sure there is no language in state law that suggests alcohol is legal in order to eliminate a black market for alcohol. So if a government bans alcohol, it's well within their authority because there's no state law it's in conflict with. I'm sure the opponents of state law cite recent rulings upholding local bans, but that case used different legal reasoning than we're talking about today. And it's pretty common for illegal and unconstitutional laws to be upheld in court a few times before they're eventually tossed out. My prediction is that a year from now, if we don't see increased police costs, but we do see our local municipalities involved in expensive litigation against legitimate business owners as the city continues to protect the economic interests of criminal dealers living in our residential neighborhoods. Furthermore, I predict that the people involved in building the ground floor of this industry in the first legal state in America have the opportunity to expand the other 48 soon-to-be legal states and other countries as well. I predict that if our community doesn't see the writing on the wall, we will lose out on these opportunities and these futures. In a community that prides itself on agriculture and research and tourism, I can't imagine a better fit for a community for this multi-million dollar newly legal industry to flourish in. So I hope we all make the right choice and see the writing on the wall. Thank you.
Questions from our members. The guidelines are that only Badger Club members can ask questions, and you'll know the Badger Club members name tag. It is possible to become an instant member if you have cash or check at the time you're ready to ask your questions. Just wave it. And questions are limited to 1 minute, less if possible. It should be framed as a question, not an opinion with a question attached to it. Your answers are limited to 2 minutes, and they will be carefully timed. So please raise your hand, and we will come to you with a microphone. Stand, state your name, and ask your question. So I have a microphone. I'm going to start us off with the first question. And my question is for you, Young. When you take into consideration these facts like Steve has pointed out, is there any mechanism for Kennewick to undo the ban if they were to see reason? Or will it be forced to go through the legal system and that expense, and then, it had to do it anyhow?
Well, yes, certainly there's, we voted the ban in, we can certainly vote the ban out. Let me say, though, when it comes to the position of the council and what would happen relative to changes, we know that the state legislature is now discussing amending the bill, the law, to mandate that all cities must allow for the retail sale of recreational marijuana. We're going to be confronted with that. The question still stands. Here we are again with another unfunded mandate. Now, there are a lot of facts that Steve Lee presented, and he and I have had discussions before. Most of what he has said is very true. But it goes back to, what about our taxpayers? What about the residents of the state? Here's what the state is doing. The state is forcing laws on the cities and refusing to play a role in helping fund the implementation of those laws. The time has come for these cities to stop and say no more. And that's the issue here. We can talk about a number of other unfunded mandates. In this particular case, when the state attorney general came out and said, look, we are not going to force cities to do that. I had a personal discussion with the attorney general, and I can tell you that he said in this particular case, it is not required that cities have to zone in these businesses. Because of the cost of doing business to the city and the taxpayers, whether they use cannabis or not, was inappropriate from the council's viewpoint. Should the law change, should the way we do business change, this council will always be available to reconsider. But when it comes to our city, we're tired of throwing the costs of doing business for the state back on the citizens of our cities.
Okay, here we go. We have a question here.
Jim Farmer. My question is twofold for the gentleman in the dark suit. Number one, there's a large marijuana sales on the illegal market because they don't have to pay taxes on what they buy. And number two, do you personally use marijuana? And if the answer is yes, where do you get it?
That's an incredible question. You're my favorite. So for the first part of the question, yes, there's a thriving black market for marijuana, not just in our community, but in every single community. People have been smoking this since it's been around. And because we ban it, doesn't mean it's not around. People are just going to do it. And if we just face the reality of human nature, we can understand that. So yes, people are smoking black market marijuana. But the reason they are smoking black market marijuana is one of two things. Either, like you said, because they cannot afford the unnormalized price of legal recreational marijuana, or can't gain access to it since the closest retail outlet is a 30-mile drive away. So there's no opportunity to make the right decision and pay the full price and get taxable, legal weed. And secondarily, the other side is there's no incentive for them to do so right now. As we see the market normalize, as we see the full 350 stores open up in the state, the costs will go down, access will improve. You don't see people stilling their own gin in their garage anymore because it's a lot easier to go to CVS or Walgreens and grab a bottle and pay a little bit of tax and just have it. and know it's safe, and know it's been well made, and know that you're probably not going to die from drinking a regular amount of it. Unfortunately, because black market marijuana is prevalent, there are none of those securities. In the legal retail marijuana trade, there is all the testing and wonderful quality assurances you could ever ask for, but drug dealers don't ID, and drug dealers don't necessarily grow the safest crops in the world. But these retail outlet store owners have a really good reason to follow all the rules and make sure that it's safe for the community. Secondarily, I do smoke marijuana. I opened with that fact as well. I'm a medical marijuana patient and have been for over 8 years. I also consider myself a recreational enthusiast, and there are lots of ways to obtain marijuana in the community, including black market, which is not illegal for a medical marijuana patient to buy black market marijuana. That's not the way the laws are written. But there are delivery services and stores all over southeastern Washington that you can just drive up to and walk right in and buy.
Mike Barrett, Joel. Your decision by Kennewick, and we're seeing it in the other communities as well, forces marijuana users in your community to make one of two decisions. They either buy it on the black market, just as they're doing now, which is unregulated, untested, potentially unsafe, or they go out of town to buy it and take their tax revenue with them. Why are those two choices in the best interest of Kennewick?
Thanks, Mike. Well, personally, I don't think either choice is good, to be honest with you. I mean, first of all, we're asking about the black market. But look, folks, I remember my dad telling me when in the 20s that he smoked marijuana. It was a big shock to me. I don't think he went to the store and bought it. I was a 60s teenager. I smoked marijuana. I didn't like it when I smoked it. I didn't go to the store and buy it. Up until this law passed, that's the only way they got marijuana in this area. That's not going to stop. It didn't stop with prohibition for whiskey being manufactured in the South. I grew up in Oklahoma. They still have stills in Oklahoma. It's not going to stop just because it's legal. So it's not the best interest to think, first of all, it's not the best interest if you believe that because we're legalizing it, we're going to stop black market sale. Of course not. Not everybody can afford the cost of what's going to be in the stores. Second of all, when you talk about taking their 1% of tax to another town, for my community, I believe that's in the best interest of the city of Kennewick because they're the ones that are going to have to take care of these stores. Prosser is a good example. Prosser has a marijuana store. If people living in Kennewick feel that that's too far to drive, I don't know what to tell them. But the fact is, for our community, it's not in the best interest financially for our city to authorize a store.
Question over here.
Ginger Vetrano, this is mostly for Steve Young. Hi, Steve. I also called the Colorado State Patrol to find out what kind of problems they're having. He says they haven't had to put on any extra people for this. They're not seem to have any problem. I also Googled to find out what problems they're having in the Colorado schools. And they haven't had, and it said there are no significant problems, because I was worried about the kids. So as a person who likes to see crimes, if you can get the criminal element out and regulate and tax it, that if we got more money out of it, because you kept talking about unfunded mandates, if we got a lot of that money, it sounds like that you would be interested.
So is your question, would I be interested if we were able to get a larger portion of the sales tax? Yeah. I mean, certainly, if we as a city council would have had to take an awfully hard look at the law if there was a larger portion of that sales tax that would benefit our taxpayers. I did the same thing you did. I looked at what was going on in Colorado. I made a few calls. I actually have a friend who goes back and forth to Colorado quite often, and I have found it funny that both Colorado and Washington are home. They're both legal marijuana. But, and I've heard the same thing you have, that there aren't any extra costs. But let me tell you, I'll go back to my statistic. When we legalized medical marijuana, our break-ins to people's homes, and a majority of these apartments, increased by 14%. Now, Did we hire more police officers? No, we couldn't, not until we recently passed another initiative. But we know that there are huge challenges with these businesses. Not only do you have the retail store, and a lot of people are focused on the retail store, but you also have to consider those that are the farms that are going to be growing. I recently received a call from an individual crosser who told me, who is a farmer, and he said there are 13 farms in Prosser proper that's raising marijuana now. Now, I know they don't have 13 permits for raising marijuana, so I hope I'm not getting anybody in trouble. But, you know, listen, you think people aren't going to try to go steal the marijuana? I got news for you, they will. But there are a lot of challenges. We do know the more marijuana is smoked, right now, the young people are not hiding it anymore. We know it. We see it. I recently saw a young man walking down the sidewalk in Mayor Fox, I'm sorry, in Richmond.
May I respond to part of that? May I respond to that as well? Oh, okay, great. I just wanted to say that I think that, you know, there's a joke that if you were raised in this town, you hear a lot that, you know, if you want to see what Eastern Washington's going to be like in 5 years, you just go to Seattle. And that we have a little bit of a delay sometimes in implementing and enacting and catching on the bandwagon sometimes. I don't want to see the Tri-Cities kick this can down the road any further if the commonly held belief is that the legislature is going to amend the legislation and require municipalities and cities to allow this in our community. I don't see why pretending and going like this is the answer. If we think that's going to happen, embracing these businesses, getting them started, getting them pumping out revenue seems to be the better option than saying, we don't want you in our community, get out and stay out. It doesn't seem like that seems fiscally responsible. Also, the economic impact isn't as simple as a 1% sales tax. There are jobs at stake, and these jobs pay a lot higher than you might think. Entry-level trimming in the marijuana industry is $15 to $25 an hour. There are not a lot of $15 to $25 an hour jobs open in the Tri-Cities. I was unemployed for a year and a half, I know. It's not that way. This is a community that pays their own taxes. They go to stores and buy things. They buy cars and dishwashers and all the things that you all buy. These people are contributing to the economic wholeness of our community, and having them as a part of our community leaves us in a better, wealthier, and more rounded way than I think telling them that we don't want them does.
Yes, this question for both of you. Mary Young, you continue to make the argument that they're unfunded. Oh, my name's Doug McKinley. You continue to make the argument that allowing legal businesses would put unfunded mandates on the city of Kennewick. But it seems to me all the costs that you're talking about are already there. People are producing marijuana illegally. People are selling it illegally. And, they're smoking it. So the city essentially has to provide police services for all those activities. Why is it that if it were a legal market, that would cost more? It seems counterintuitive to me that if that was a legal market, that would cost more than taking care of it as an illegal market. And I'll leave the question open to both of them. Thank you.
So you were asking both of us?
Yeah.
You want me to go first?
Sure.
Well, look, let's talk about the growth of it. Those that are selling marijuana on the black, we'll use the term black market. Those that are selling on the black market, for the most part, aren't necessarily growing them in this area. That's number one. Those that aren't letting it be seen. So it's different when you have 100 acres of marijuana in a farmland and you're trying to provide protection to that, where in the black market side and they're growing marijuana, we're trying to find it ourselves. So I'm certain others are having trouble finding it. The same thing with processing. When you're processing marijuana and you're opening up a business around processing, you have a facility that's operating like any other business. And while I agree it does create jobs, and I'm all for creating jobs, it also creates some new challenges for security. Security that we currently don't offer to those who are processing it in their homes. In fact, we try to find where they're processing it in their homes, and we can't find those either. My point is that it's two completely different things. Our drug task force will find marijuana grows and will follow the black market long enough until they've found enough sellers to figure out where it's being processed. And we go in and get it. When it becomes a business, it's out in the open. We're expected to protect those people now. We're not there to stop them, we're there to protect them. And it will increase the, it's not like manufacturing golf clubs. It is a different business that a lot of people want access to because of the high cost of the product.
I'm sorry, but I don't think you really addressed my question. You're spending money on the drug task force. How does that compare to the costs of just providing protection to the businesses? My point is there are costs either way. Can you compare those?
Yeah, we'll still have a drug task force. We'll still have a drug task force out tackling the black market. We will have additional officers to protect those that are legally manufacturing and growing. That's the comparison. It is additional police officers. I hope that answered the question a little bit.
That's better. Thank you.
Steve Lee, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'd just like to say a couple of things. First of all, the illusion some of you might have that this isn't already happening in the community on a semi-commercial level is inaccurate. There are statewide known brands that come out of the Tri-Cities on the medical marijuana industry for processing and growing some of the state's best marijuana and marijuana products. That exists. It already happens. These people are forced into situations where they have to create front companies and lie to landlords and risk paying their power bill because they might get kicked out. And when they do get kicked out, where do they go? They go to their garage because these people still have to make money and they've got a skill set that's a very, very high demand. So it's not going away, but allowing these people to get commercial spaces and put big bars on the windows and doors and make themselves safer, if that's what your opinion is a lot better than having these people have to go all ninja style and hide in their homes and garages and hope they don't get caught. Secondarily, the market or the Metro Drug Task Force, in my opinion, should be focused on finding methamphetamine and heroin and stamping out drugs problems in our communities that actually have incidents of fatalities, like alcohol or tobacco. So I think that the issue of better using the task force time is a really simple one, because there are much more dangerous things they should be policing. And there are a lot of farms, and they're not very well hidden. You should drive down any highway in this town about 10 miles, and you're probably going to see a plot of marijuana being grown, whether it's being grown medically or whether they have an I-502 license. Either way, it's there, and it's already there. So there are no extra police costs, in my opinion. Thirdly, I just want to dispel the myth of the marijuana industry taking over vast plots of land. If you take no matter what size map of the state of Washington and put a pencil on it and make a little teeny circle, the small circle you can make, that circle is larger than the 2 million square feet the state has set aside for the legal marijuana industry. It is not a lot of space. A Tier 3 licensed farm can produce its 1,000+ plants of marijuana on under 2 acres. So that is $20 million a year of financial activity on 2 acres that you put an 8-foot fence around.
We have a question over here.
Jim Robles. I'd like to ask you a 3-part question on trust and policy, and also I'd be interested if you want to share your personal worldviews. First, most locally, I just finished a book by Alice Hoffman based on the research she did in getting her doctorate in sociology at Princeton. And she makes the case that through the combination of our drug laws and the advances in technology and aggressive policing, we're trapping an entire segment of our population in permanent poverty, permanent illegal status. Is that in our interest? Second part, I don't see how the Cali cartel or any of the other cartels, because that has ever would have existed. And the loss of life in South America is far beyond something comparable to what we've suffered in Vietnam because of our drug laws combined with our demand. Is that really in our interest? Is that right? Extending the radius one last week, drugs in Turkey don't find their way here. But
You just asked the question.
during our adventures in Afghanistan, Taliban fighters have paid 3 times as much as government troops based on sale of illegal drugs. Is that in our interest?
Who's that for? Can I start with that one? No, that's not in our interest. All 3 of those is not in our interest. And the legal market, that's why you see other countries across the pond and down south doing full stop recreational drug legalization so they can spend their police dollars chasing down the people that are actually a problem instead of trapping lots and lots of people into a circular penal system that they can never get out of. It's a horrible situation, and there are many, many people that I've come across that could have wonderful jobs at the area or wonderful jobs working for a union, if only not that weed felony. If only I didn't get pulled over with that bag of weed. People lose their homes and their children, and it's not as simple as the kinder, gentler black market of yesterday that my father bought on the black market, so it's safe for me. That people die. People get shot in weed deals because it is illegal and there's money involved and it's a crime. So the less illegal it is, the safer we all are and the better it all will become and the cheaper it will be for the people who want to play by the rules.
Oh, am I supposed to answer that too? Sorry. Well, no, it's not in the best interest. But, I find it interesting. Having grown up in Oklahoma was a dry state. And I found it quite interesting that, the manufacture of alcohol, the black market delivery of 3.2 beer out of Kansas and Arkansas, the crime didn't stop after we legalized it in Oklahoma. We still had crime. We actually had more drunks. If we talk, here we are talking about legalizing marijuana. Is it the right thing to do? Is it the wrong thing to do? Is marijuana right or wrong? Look, there's crime associated with alcohol. There's crime associated with marijuana. As long as the price is high, you're still going to have a black market. As long as you have a black market, you're still going to have dead bodies. It's just the way it is. But remember, go back to what I said about the medical marijuana. We have legal problems. We have crime because people legally hold medical marijuana in their home. It's authorized, it's legal, and we're having break-ins, we're having stabbings, we're having kidnappings because of that. And so it's not going to change because the person who can afford 82% sales tax on medical or on recreational marijuana it is going to have it, and those that can't afford it wants it. It isn't good. Any part of this is not good for the community.
We have a new member who just joined.
Full disclosure, this is my wife.
My name is Jessica Lee, and my question is for Steve Young. I would like to know, how will the city avoid financial difficulties due to the inevitable lawsuits that you face? How deep are the city's pockets? And is the city just gambling that this will all work out in your favor?
He just texted that.
I promise. She's just really smart. I'm kidding.
I don't know who he was texting. We were sued. We had a suit filed against us before we ever voted. So I don't know why they're rushing to sue so fast. I have my suspicions, but if the question is it fiscally responsible to be willing to ban marijuana and go to court for this? Yes, it is. With this has to stop somewhere. And I go back to the unfunded mandates. And I recognize many people are a little bit confused about the unfunded mandates. But Washington State is getting worse and worse about putting double burdens on taxpayers. And where does it stop? And by the way, the city of Kennewick is quite used to going through lawsuits, I might add. But, again, the lady that was at I don't remember her name, was at the city council the night we voted. We allowed a large number of pro-marijuana people to testify, a few that were against marijuana to testify. And she had already filed suit, and we hadn't even voted yet. And she told us a week or 2 weeks earlier, she had already filed suit in court for what we were going to vote on, because she claimed to know me and that she understood my personality. It does make me wonder how many people sue just for the sake of suing, okay? But is it the right, fiscally responsible for the city? If it's bad for our constituents, it is the right thing to do. Yes.
We have a question over here.
Yes, my name is Bob Stewart. The research that I've read states that marijuana deleterious to emerging to the brains of our youth, our young people, and that it is also an introductory drug for harder drugs. My question is there any research that shows that marijuana is more available or less available to school-age children if it's legalized?
Do you mind if I take that? So I've done a lot of reading on data, and again, I don't have any of this prepared, but I'll give you the long and short of it, and you can Google fact check me later. Basically, the situation is this in Washington and Colorado, and really nationwide. No matter what kind of use of marijuana, the percentage of use of marijuana is going down. No matter what demographic, no matter who you're talking about, children, adults, whatever, less and less people are using marijuana, to be honest, even including in legal states. So that's one thing. Secondarily, the availability to our children, as we've illustrated several times tonight, it's already there. They already know where to get it, and that's not a problem. So that's that. It's already there. And I'd like to illustrate both alcohol and tobacco sales as great examples of proper regulation that keeps things out of the hands of kids. I would hard press you to find a 14-year-old that has bought a bottle of booze at CVS and got away with it, but didn't steal it. I think you'd be hard pressed to find a 14-year-old that thinks cigarette smoking is not medically harmful to you. There are education and public awareness campaigns, and there are regulations and restrictions, and all this wonderful stuff can be, of course, used to fix the problems you're concerned about, but only if we embrace the industry and allow these things to happen. As long as we put our hands over our ears and say, not me, not now, not today, no one's learning anything, no one is being educated or changed.
Just stand and tell us your name.
I'm Kevin Midwest. Luckily, the second question I kind of had already got asked. So that my first question, I'm kind of frustrated with how people like to argue using a crystal ball. What I want to know is where the legal authority to ban a business comes from, because I cannot find it.
You want Steve to answer that?
You both can answer.
In all seriousness, we did not ban any businesses. What we did was follow the law that's required by this law to establish zones for growth, processing, and sale of marijuana. We are required, there are very strict guidelines on where the growth can be and how much acreage they can have, where the processing can occur, and where the retail stores can be located. Schools come into play, parks, daycare centers, and so on. Steve knows more about that than I do. What they require the cities to do is establish zones for those locations. Our planning commission, when it was presented to them to establish zones, it's not just a commercial zone, it's a zone for we use the sale of marijuana. Our planning commission came back and said, we don't want to have that zone in our city. And so what we did is we did not allow for any zones in the city of Kennewick where sale could occur.
Can I maybe say one more thing real quick?
Question over here.
Oh, okay.
So,
Your name?
Brad Peck, Franklin County. Franklin County has done the moratorium thing in part because we think it's wise to collect some wisdom from some of the folks around the state. But my question is, Mary Young, I heard you initially say that you were a majority of your citizens said no, but then later heard you say that if there were enough tax revenue, you would say yes. And Mr. Lee, I think I heard you say that you think it ought to be yes because that's what the statewide vote was. So the question is, based on that, if you were an elected official in a city or county, as I am, and you were making this choice, do you think that you ought to predicate that on what the vote count was in your local jurisdiction, what the vote was at the state level, or some other measure, perhaps personal conscience?
That's an incredible question. It depends on if I'm a man of ethics, a man of an oath, or a man that sways to whatever I think is popular. I tend to think I'd like to be a man of ethics and principles. I don't think I would take the job of city council unless I was willing to fully act on the oath to uphold state laws as well as local laws. I think that the one thing that doesn't really get talked about in listening to your jurisdiction is that the jurisdiction is much broader than the voting base. I mean, in all sense, there are people here that don't vote, and the majority of the people in Tri-Cities don't vote. And people that don't vote are predisposed to being young or old. People here that don't vote are predisposed to voting progressively or liberally, however you want to look at it. And so this is a whole group of the majority of the community that doesn't say and that don't get listened to. And I feel like if we could do a full poll, and this is just me, I think we'd see a lot higher number than 50% of the people not want any of this nonsense of a ban. I think you'd hear a lot of conversations in the streets when people aren't necessarily voters or that can afford the luxury of being in rooms like this at luncheons. There's a big part of our constituency that is working at Taco Bell right now that can't get here to make their voice heard. There's a big part of our constituency that is in a nursing home and can't get here to be part of this conversation. So I think that it would behoove me to listen to the broader community rather than just the numbers.
Yeah, Brad, let me go back to answer your question about changing my mind. I think what I said, and I'm sure everybody correct me if I'm wrong, I think what I said is I would be more willing to reconsider. I will tell you, though, there's pieces and parts to that. I would have to consider what those that come before us and talk about it and at our hearings. But there are a lot of parts to this. But from a business perspective, if we were to generate more revenue out of this, certainly I would be more willing to reconsider. Would I support it today? No. But because of other issues. But also with what you were saying about the voters, if I can address that. Listen, when you sit on the city council, first of all, Steve, you're one of the more learned people I've dealt with on this issue.
Well, thank you.
I appreciate it. I really get tired of people accusing me of violating my sworn duty as the mayor and the city Kennewick council. And I hear where you're coming from. But listen, all we have to go by are those that come into our community, into our city council chamber and testify what we hear from the voters. If people aren't voting, then as far as I'm concerned, I don't want to hear them the next time. People have an obligation to vote. That's what we go by. And when I say that nearly 60% of the voters, I'm talking about nearly 60% of those that chose to vote. Brad, you might know better than I do. At that last election, we had, 23% turnout on the vote? Something like that. That's sad. But that's what we have to go by. I don't go door to door asking everybody their thoughts. And I don't agree that there are those that can't get there is a large majority. That's a small minority of those that could be voting. So, it's a huge challenge for council to try to appease all the citizens and to try to go eventually. Thank you.
John Swoll. Mayor, you have given us an explanation of your reasons for the vote and the way that the council has acted on it. And as I understand it, you said that the state legislature is making this law and what to do about it. Among the council members, have you discussed among yourselves what would be appropriate changes that you would be able to accept, cooperate with this, and then communicate those to the state legislature so they'd have a chance to come up with a law that would be compatible with what you feel is necessary?
In all honesty, this is a cautious answer. Our council, and we're very fortunate in the city of Kennewick, and I'm not sure about the other cities, but in the city of Kennewick, our council members very rarely talk about an issue outside the council chamber that we're dealing with. First of all, it's really inappropriate to do that. Now, are there times we may ask an individual, one of the other council members, did they read an article the same way? Yes, that happens. We have not talked about this issue. I will say, though, that Senator Brown is here today, and she didn't want me to point her out. But she's sitting over there by my favorite tent. Senator Brown and I work together every day, and we both are concerned about what's going on with legislation at the legislative level. Not only with this bill, but many other far more serious bills than this one that we're dealing with. We have not, on our council, discussed what would be acceptable we're more concerned about the fact that what we're hearing is that they're going to make us let the businesses be open regardless of any other changes.
We have time for one last question. We've got it right here.
Ed Frost. We all realize that both marijuana and alcohol are legal substances for adults. We all realize that used in excess or abuse, both of those substances can be very injurious to the individual and have a considerable negative impact on society. I understand, Mayor Young, your concern that by allowing marijuana to be sold in the city of Kennewick, you're going to have additional costs having to do with law enforcement, emergency, and all that other. The part I don't understand, sir, is how can the city be an active participant in the manufacture of alcohol and sales of alcohol through their participation in the Columbia Drive Wine Village project, and still at the same time say that adults in the city of Kennewick can't exercise their right to make a decision as to whether they want to use marijuana in a legal fashion?
Well, it's fairly simple. We have no option on alcohol, whether it's the manufacturer, whether it's growing grapes, manufacturing the wine, or selling it. The state did not give us an out for that. You're actually talking to an individual who doesn't drink. So for me, I could care less whether they sell it there. In fact, I'd be just as happy if they did. But we do not have any options on that. Let me also say that this is, again, another one of those issues with the state where prior to the change in the law, where we did away with state stores and went to the private side, all for the sake of small business, what happened to this, and I'll just talk about the city of Kennewick, the state changed the law on the basis that this was good to get the government out of retail sales. I agree. What they did is they took 70% of the revenue coming to the city away from us and put it back over the state. And in the first year, after they created these private stores, we got zero tax revenue on any alcohol sales. So, it's another one of those. And I'll tell you, in answering your question, had we had an out at that time, we would have taken it. Because again, you're the state dumping back on the taxpayers saying, drunk driving, but we're going to take the revenue for it. You guys take care of it. It's another business. It's another inspection we have to do. And it just goes on. And they took 100% of the revenue from alcohol back to the state and left the cities with nothing. So I'm not saying you're wrong. It is a little conflicting, and I get it. We just didn't have an out.
All right, thank you. We're going to give each of you 2 minutes to wrap up your presentations. And if the Digger Award Committee can start caucusing now, we'll present the Digger Award for today's best question when they are done. So I don't know if I would prefer to go first.
Okay, great. Oh man, so much has been talked about today, and I'm incredibly appreciative that all of you have stuck with this and listened to both sides of this, and nobody's thrown rotten tomatoes or anything like that. That's really nice. I haven't seen one throwing the stank eye around anywhere. Everyone here's been great. But the big lesson I want everyone to take from this, no matter what side of this debate you're on, is that this is coming, and you're not going to stop it. You might delay it in this community, but even the elected officials say that this is a heavy railroad and it's on its way. The other side of that is the thriving black market is already in our community. There is no decision that makes sense to encourage crime and get rid of any sort of revenue, even if it's only 1%. That is not, the spreadsheet doesn't happen. And whether it's about your oath or whether it's about your personal philosophy or your family traditions or values, really, when you're running a city and you're making rules for an entire constituency, it comes down to the spreadsheet. And the spreadsheet is on my side. The spreadsheet says this is good for communities, it's good for jobs, it's good for tax dollars, it makes the highways safer, it makes homes safer, it makes our communities safer. If all of that is a 1% gain in safeness and economic impact and all, it's still worth the 1%. Any good is good. And any stomping out of the black market that we can do is in the best interest of our community. And I just think that kicking the can down the road and waiting for Olympia to continue to make our choices for us seems to be a little counterintuitive if unfunded mandates and people telling you what to do are your pet peeve. I think that you should probably take responsibility for your city and maybe make your own choices before people make them for you. There are as good and bad, but this city and this community has dealt with bad before, and we've been just fine. So let's try and give this a shot.
Thank you, everyone, for having us here. I'll go back to what I said early on. I was not brought here today to debate the merits of marijuana. I don't know if it's good for people or bad for people. I don't know whether it's going to, I can't prove to you today that it's going to increase crime. I can tell you that we spend an awful lot of energy fighting the tobacco companies and ensuring that we have very strict laws regarding the sale and use of tobacco. I can tell you that the state has been really good about taking as much money away from the local constituency as they can, and I find it an absolute boring to this community to see that happen. My job as an elected official is to represent the citizens of my city. The way we do that is public hearings and votes, and that's how we know what the citizens want. And that's what we're here representing. And the one thing I can tell you that the citizens of Kennewick don't want is increased taxes. They don't want to spend another dime for other people's enjoyment. They don't want to spend a dime on anything else other than it's absolutely necessary for that city. And I agree with it. And we have fought hard in the city of Kennewick with this council to not raise taxes, to not find ways to increase costs to the citizens. I won't speak about previous councils, and I won't talk about future councils. But the decision we made to ban it or to not zone the sale of marijuana in our city, I feel was the right decision. What will the future hold? We don't know. We know things are going on right now to force us into that mode. But right now, I believe we made the right decision for our city and for our citizens. But thank you for having us here today. And it's always fun to get to talk to Steve.
All right, we have a couple of final bits of business. I would say please join me in thanking Mayor Steve Young and Steve Lee, but I think that applause was pretty good. And I have a couple of gifts from the Public Basin Badger for free guys.
Yeah. It's got my name on it. Mine's got that name on it.
Our next Badger Club meeting has not been set in stone yet, so I would like to encourage you guys to check the website, our Facebook page, or sign up for our mailing list as you head out the door today to be informed of when the next meeting will be. And the judges have chosen our Digger Award winner, which is Kevin Midbust. So you get and please do remember to return your name badge as you go out. If you don't return that, you don't get to ask a question next time. Thank you, everybody, for coming. We're adjourned.
Thank you.